1:06 a.m. in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a caller called 911 operatives. The operatives asked the caller if he needed police, fire, or a medical emergency. The caller kept yelling for help. He told the operatives that someone jumped through his brother's window. He said shots were fired. The operator asked him how many shots were fired. He said 3 to 4 shots were fired. The 911 operative asked him if the person that fired the shot was a white or a black male. He said the shooter was a black male. The caller said he ran out of the back door. He said he is presently knocking on the door of his neighbors. He is trying to get someone to open the door. The operative asked the caller if he thinks his brother was still inside the house. The caller said his brother is still in the house. The 911 operative asked him if there were other people in the house. He said his sister and his 3 nephews were still in the house. While he was on the phone with the 911 operator, he saw someone jumping through his sister's window. He kept telling his sister that he is already on the phone with the police. He told her to wait for the arrival of the policemen. Detective Chase Calhoun received a call while he was asleep that they have a homicide. The incident sounded like a home invasion. He worked in that area when he was in gangs and also as a patrol officer, so he is pretty familiar with the neighborhood. Patrol officers arrived at the scene earlier than the detectives. A patrol officer gave the detectives a brief on the current situation. He said the victim was lying down dead in his bedroom. He said it looked as if the victim took at least 2 gunshots. He said the suspect had escaped before they arrived at the scene of the incident. Detective Calhoun Chase asked the victim's girlfriend that lived with him if she was at the house when the shooting occurred. She said she fled when the shooting began. The patrol officer said her sister and her kids were also in the apartment at the time of the shooting. Patrol officers were able to find the children of Chase's girlfriend and her sister who called 911. The officer said the sister snatched the kids and took them somewhere. He said after the scene was secured by the police, the sister left with the 3 children. The detective asked officers if they got an ID for the victim. The officer said the name of the victim is Dion Carr. 28 years old Dion Carr was born and raised in Tulsa, and he attended Will Rogers High School. Dion was learning heating and air conditioning repair, and he was working 2 jobs to support his family. A detective asked patrol officers if the owner of the house that the victim lived in was known. He said it's probably owned by the victim and his girlfriend. He asked if she was in bed with the victim. The officer said she was in bed with the victim when the shooting started. Detective Jason White said the bedroom is located on the south side of the house. When detectives entered the victim's apartment, they found him lying down on the floor. They noticed that he was shot multiple times. He was shot in the arm, chest, and torso. They found a gun where his dead body was lying. The gun is a Taurus 9mm and 4 9mm casings. They noticed that the victim's window was open and there were blood stains all over the floor. Under the window, the team found a single Air Jordan shoe that had mud in its grooves. Detectives went to the back of the window to see what they could find. They noticed bloodstains at the back of the window too. They also found a shoe print at the back of the window. A detective said it looked as if someone entered the house through the window and was more than likely shot. He said if it was gunfire, then that was the best place for them to start. Then, a gunshot victim was dropped off at Hillcrest Hospital minutes after the caller called 911. The victim was shot in the leg. The bullet hit the femoral artery of the victim and doctors are struggling to keep him alive. Detective Jason White asked if they have an ID for the victim at Hillcrest Hospital. He was told the name of the victim is John Doe. Detective Jason White said he was running to Hillcrest Hospital to see if they can pull the video, or at least try to get stills from the video. The team hopes hospital surveillance will give them the image of the person that dropped the victim at the hospital. As Dion's girlfriend was brought down to homicide, officers at the hospital got an ID for the gunshot victim. His name is Chauncey Thomas. Detective Chase said he is familiar with Chauncey from where he used to work in gangs. 25 years old Chauncey Thomas works as a welder. He has prior convictions for knowingly receiving or concealing stolen property, burglary, and resisting an officer. Detective Chase said Chauncey was arrested for homicide back in 2013. He said during that homicide, Chauncey robbed a guy with a .40 caliber handgun. Chauncey was later acquitted of those charges. While Detective Chase and another detective decided to go downtown to search for witnesses, Detective Chase received a call from a detective who was at the hospital. He said Chauncey's family and his two girlfriends arrived at the hospital some minutes ago. He said they were trying to keep both girlfriends separated to avoid drama. He said he has been talking to one of Chauncey's girlfriends, but she has been less helpful. He said he will see what he can get from her. Detective Chase asked about the condition of Chauncey. He told Detective Chase that Chauncey keeps pumping out blood, but he has taken in for surgery. Detective Chase said he wants to know how Chase's family found out so quickly that he was at the hospital. He said it is curious to know how they got notified. Detective Chase and another detective went to the interrogation room where the victim's girlfriend was being held. As soon as they entered, Detective Chase told her to tell him what happened. She said she and the victim were in her room. She said she was strolling through Facebook and the victim was on his phone listening to music. She said she heard something that sounded was trying to pry the screen open. She said yes, but it was a screen. She said she has always slept with her windows open. Detective Chase asked her that when she heard that somebody was trying to enter her room, what did she do? She said she told the victim to turn down his music. She said about 5 minutes later, they heard the dude coming through the window. She said the dude was on top of Dion and she was behind him. She said she was trying to yank for the gun and there was another dude at the window. She said the other guy was trying to push the headboard. She said somehow they got on the floor and started tussling. She started pleading with them to stop because her kids were asleep in the room. She said at that point, Dion told her to run. She said she took off running and that was when she heard the 2 shots. Detective Chase asked her what she did after she heard the 2 shots. She said she ran down the street and she was knocking on all the neighbors' doors, but nobody opened the door. She said when she got a house on the corner, she felt somehow was chasing her, and so she hid under a truck. Detective Chase asked her where her sister was then. She said her sister told her she was in the backyard next door. He asked her if she saw any vehicle parked on the street when she came out of the house. She said she didn't. She said she was just running and looking straight. He asked her that when the shooter launched through the window, did he go for the head or the feet first? She said he went for the head first. Detective Chase asked her if the killer was thin. She said he was thin and pretty skinny. He asked her what he was wearing. She said he was wearing a black hoodie while the dude at the window was wearing a gray hoodie. He asked her what the guy at the window was doing. She said he was trying to get in but he couldn't get past the headboard. She said Dion was telling them that he had nothing. Detective Chase asked her what Dion meant by that. She said it means he doesn't have money or weed on him. He asked her the number of weeds Dion sells on average. She said it was nothing major. He asked her whether Dion owned a gun. She said he does. He asked her the color. She said it's a black gun and that's all she knows. She said he hid the gun from the kids. Detective Chase asked her if she knows anybody that was after Dion or anyone that had beef with him. She said she would have spoken about it if she knew. Detective Chase asked her about Dion. She said Dion was a nice person that helped anybody that came to him for help. He asked her how long she has been with Dion. She said she has been with Dion for almost 2 years. He asked her if she had any kid with Dion. She said she doesn't have any kid with Dion, but he loved her kids as if they were his. But he had 4 children. Detective Chase asked her if anyone has given her an update on Dion. She said yes. The update she has is Dion is deceased. Detective Chase said he was very sorry for her loss, and that was why they were sitting there at that hour. He told her they want to figure out who killed Dion. Lieutenant Watkins returned from talking to Chauncey's friends and family at the hospital. He said Chauncey's girlfriend Tatiana lied about her name, but he was able to figure out who she was. He said a kid showed up at the hospital and grabbed Tatiana and he told him that he cannot talk to her. He said they jumped in a car and took off. Detectives turned to the hospital's surveillance video from the time Chauncey Thomas was dropped at the hospital. In the footage, they saw a guy dropping Chauncey at the hospital, but they couldn't figure out who he was because he was wearing a face mask. They discovered that the guy had one shoe on, which matched the right leg of the Air Jordan they saw at the victim's house. Then, Crime Stoppers got a break on the case. Detectives got a Crime Stopper that their suspect's vehicle is parked right at Zenith Avenue. Detectives made their way to Zenith Avenue to see if they can find the car. Detective Calhoun got a recent photo of Chauncey from the Fugitive Warrant Squad. He said the latest update is that Chauncey was going to pass away as a result of injuries. When the detectives got there, they could not find the car they were looking for. 13 hours into the investigation, headquarters got a tip. Detective Jason White got a call that about 25 members of Chauncey's family showed up at the hospital. Detective Jason White said they will go to Hillcrest Hospital to start looking and see who's there. He said their interest will be to speak with Chauncey's girlfriend who lied about her name. Detective Chauncey said he has talked with Chauncey's parents. He said what they stated was that they woke up at their house at about 1:30 by the girl that lied about her name to the officers. He said all the girl said to them was that she got a phone call from Chauncey as he was coming down there and he told her that he has been shot, and that was all they knew. Detective Chase said it's just a matter of time before they find her and deal with her. He said their #1 priority is to find the guy that dumped Chauncey at the hospital. The next day, the team continued to search for the Kia Optima. Then, the team spots Chauncey's girlfriend getting into a car at Hillcrest Hospital, and they pull her over. The team went to her car and they told her that need to take her downtown and have a talk with her. She agreed and followed the detectives to headquarters. She was immediately taken to an interrogation room as soon as they arrived at homicide. Detective Chase Calhoun and another detective went to the room to have a chat with her. Detective Chase told her he doesn't want to take much of her time. He said he knew she was leaving the hospital. So, what's the latest update? She said Chauncey had a brain activity, which means his brain stems aren't functioning, and he cannot move. She said it can go either way. Detective Chase asked her why she didn't want to follow detectives to homicide headquarters on the night of the incident. She said she heard people were saying she was with Chauncey, and she was the reason why Chauncey got shot. She said it was hard to grieve and defend her at the same time. Detective Chase said they have talked to a lot of people and his understanding was that when the deal went down, she received a phone call. He asked her the exact time she received the call. She said it was 1:06 a.m. She said Chauncey called her and told her that he has been shot. She said she thought he was joking at first, so she asked him if he was being serious. She said he told her that he was not joking about what he told her. She said he told her to meet him at Hillcrest Hospital, and he dropped the phone before he could hang up. She said at that point she kept hearing breathe. Detective Chase asked her if the voice she heard was that of Chauncey or not. She said the voice she was hearing was not Chauncey's voice. He asked if it was a male or a female voice. She said it was a male voice. He asked her if the voice was a voice she recognized. She said it was distant, so it was not easy for her to recognize the voice. Detective Chase told her they need people like her who cared about Chauncey to come forward and help them do the right thing. He said he assumes that she cared for Chauncey, that was why she was at the hospital. He told her that it's important for them to find out who Chauncey was with that night. He said if she cared about Chauncey, she has to tell them. He pasted a plain white sheet on her table and she wrote a name. The name she wrote was Justin. Detective Chase asked her Justin's last name and she said she doesn't know. She said it was another friend of Chauncey that told her to call Justin. Detective Chase said he is familiar with Chauncey's other friend from previous investigations. Chauncey's girlfriend said she called Justin and asked him what was going on. She said Justin told her that he dropped Chauncey off 20 minutes ago. She said he never answered her call after that day. She said it looked suspicious because Chauncey was not with anyone all day. Detective Chase asked her if Justin was at her apartment that day. She replied in the affirmative. Detective Chase asked her if the voice she heard the day Justin came to her apartment sounded like the voice that was saying breathe when Chauncey called her. She said yes. He asked her if Justin was a white or black guy. She said he's mixed. He asked her if Justin was on Facebook. She said there is a picture of Justin on Chauncey's Facebook page. Detective Chase told her to hang a second and he left the interrogation room. Detectives went on Facebook to search for Justin. After a few minutes of searching, they found a picture that fits Justin's physical description. They discovered that his surname is Harjo. 23 years. Justin Harjo has prior convictions for burglary and false declaration of ownership. Detective Chase went back into the interrogation room with the picture they found and asked Chauncey's girlfriend whether the person in the picture is the Justin she was talking about. She checked the picture and confirmed that it was Justin. Detective Chase asked her about the type of car Justin drove to her apartment. She said she has never seen the car. He asked her where Justin was staying. She said Justin has been staying with Chauncey's friend who gave her Justin's number. She said the friend was recently arrested for the possession of illegal weapons. She gave Detective Chase Justin's number. After he collected the number, he asked for a few minutes and left the interrogation room. As the clock winds down, detectives zero in on Justin Harjo. 10 days later, detectives learned that Chauncey Thomas died 3 days after the shooting as a result of a single gunshot wound to his leg. The bullet struck part of his femoral artery, which resulted in his death. Detective Chase said based on the evidence they had, he is confident that Chauncey Thomas was the shooter. But unfortunately, he is not alive. He said he would love to have interviewed him because he would have been able to tell them why they chose Dion and what the goal was. Justin and Chauncey's phone records finally came in. Cell phone tower data placed Justin and Chauncey together on the night of the murder. Detective Margaret found a number Justin was calling desperately on the day of the incident. She also found the address of the person. Detective Chase and Detective Jesse went in search of Justin at the address Detective Margaret pulled up. When they got there, they couldn't find Justin's car. The fugitive warrant squad placed surveillance on the house in case Justin returns. The next day, with no sign of Justin, fugitive officers followed someone that was seen leaving the house and pulled them over. The driver was identified as the person Justin called repeatedly on the night of the murder. Detective Chase took him to the back seat. He said the reason why he wants to talk to him is that he has evidence that he has been in contact with Justin Harjo. He said he has to follow them to headquarters for a brief talk. When they got to homicide, Detective Chase told him that they are carrying out an investigation, and they were able to develop that he has a relationship with Justin Harjo. He asked him the last time he spoke to Harjo was. He said he spoke with Harjo about a week ago. He said Harjo came in that night and he told him that his homeboy has been shot in the leg. Detective Chase asked him if Harjo mentioned homeboy or he specifically mentioned Chauncey. He said Harjo said Chauncey or 3. He said Harjo called his friend who was arrested for possession of weapons. He asked him what Justin was saying. He said Justin didn't say anything. He was just listening. He asked him whether Justin told him he was with 3 when 3 got shot. He replied in the affirmative. He said he told him that 3 went in through the window. He said the dude grabbed the gun. He wrestles and tussles with the dude and the dude shot. Then, he shot back. Then, 3 jumped out through the window. He asked whether the gun hit 3. He said the gun hit 3 and pulled him across the street. He said Justin owned the gun that led to his friend's arrest. He said Justin and Chauncey wanted to pull off a robbery to help their friend. A fugitive warrant officer joins the interrogation. Detective Chase asked him the kind of car Justin drove when he was with him. He said the car was a 4-door little and gray car. Detective Chase asked him where they can find the car. He said Justin told him that he needed to follow him to dump the car because there were blood stains in it. He said they got off on the highway, they saw a field and they pulled up to the right spot. Detective Chase asked what happened to the car. He said Justin set the car on fire with a lighter. He said he also used a can of paint as an accelerant. Detective Chase asked him where they went after Justin set the car on fire. He said Justin stayed at the house for a few days after the murder. He said after some days, Justin told him that he was going to see his baby mama because she has been texting and calling him. He said he asked Justin if he was going up there. Detective Chase asked him what he meant by up there. He said Kansas. He asked him if he thinks Justin is in Kansas presently. He said he thinks so. Detective Chase asked him the last time he spoke to Justin. He said it was about a week ago. He said Justin called him and was asking him if he has heard the news. He told Justin that he has heard the news. He told Justin that he has brought the heat to him. Detective Chase asked him if he knows where they could find the car. He said he believes the car has been towed to a local junkyard. Crime analyst Margaret Bills called the local junkyard and they confirmed that they have a Kia that matched Justin's car. Detective Chase and Detective Jesse went to the local junkyard to check the car. After they finished checking the car, they believe they have gotten enough evidence to charge Justin with the death of Dion. Justin Harjo was charged with first-degree murder and he is awaiting trial. He is presumed innocent until proven guilty. 10:02 p.m. in Mobile, Alabama, a call came through to 911. The 911 operative answered the call and asked what the emergency was. The caller said she is on Michigan Avenue. She said someone just hit his car and the person kept going. He said they are chasing behind them as he is talking. The 911 operative asked her if she has the tag number of the car that hit them. She said they are not close enough to get the tag of the car. She said they are trying to run. She said they are trying to turn into a dead end right now. She told the 911 operatives to get some policemen there. She said they had turned their lights and everything off. A few minutes into the chase, the car that hit them stopped, and the caller's husband gets out trying to speak with the person that hit their car. The 911 operative was still on phone asking the caller what was happening. She started screaming that the driver is shooting at them and her husband has been hit. The 911 operative asked her to calm down so that he can understand her. He asked her where she was now. She said she is lying on the ground, but the hit-and-run driver has fled with his car, and her injured husband is trying to follow him. She said her husband was chasing her behind the car and she was walking the path they took. The 911 operative asked her what she saw so that he can get someone across to her. She said she saw a car crash in a yard. A few minutes later, police and EMS arrive and found that the caller's husband was shot multiple times. They attempted to revive him, but he could not be saved. For homicide detectives, their chance of solving a murder is cut in half if they do not get a lead within the first 48 hours. Detective Glenn Barton will lead the investigation. He briefed detectives that they got a call at about 22:07 of shots being fired. He said they arrived at the scene at 22:10 and found the 911 caller, who is a longtime girlfriend of the deceased. He said she told officers that she and her husband were in a vehicle and they got sideswiped. He said she told him that they started to pursue the vehicle. While they were pursuing the vehicle, they drove into a dead-end area. He said the secondary video they have revealed that the victim got out of the car and the guy driving the vehicle started firing at the victim. He said the victim got back in his vehicle and he came to rest at that location. Detective Nettles said the caller is at the police headquarters as they speak. Detective Glenn Barton said the victim's name is Patrick Edwards. Born and raised in Mobile, 35 years old Patrick Edwards was trying to start a landscaping business and was a partner in his family's barbecue food truck. He leaves behind a loving family and 2 sons. Patrick was shot twice to the chest and once to his left arm. The detectives agreed that the victim's car should be towed and searched for evidence. The detectives found blood, broken glasses, and a gold ring at the scene of the incident. Detective Glenn Barton said it will be nice if they can find out if the ring belonged to the suspect. Detective Nettle took the picture of the ring and said he will show the victim's girlfriend to find out who really owned the gold ring. In a nearby driveway, another car parked on the street appears to have been struck by either the victim's car or the suspect's vehicle. The detectives agreed that it should be towed to the yard too. CSI collects shards of plastic from a taillight. Detective Glenn Barton said what they have looked like a road rage situation. He said he will talk to the fiancé of the victim who saw it firsthand and try to get a better understanding. Detective Glenn Barton and Detective Julius Nettles returned to the headquarters to interrogate the victim's wife. When he entered the investigation room where the victim's fiancé was, he introduced himself and Detective Nettles. He consoled her, and he said he knows she will be going through a lot presently. He said he just wants her to tell them as much as she can remember about what happened. She said they were on Michigan Avenue headed towards the interstate, and a car came up. She said the dude hit them and then speeds up. She said the car hits them on the side like it was going around. She said it was like the car was flying and was trying to zip. Detective Nettles asked her who was driving the vehicle at that time. She said it was Patrick that was driving. She said Patrick told her to call the police, and they started following the car. She said they pulled up to the dead end and the car was sitting there with all lights turned off. She said they got out of the car and Patrick told him that he just hit their car. She said the window of the dude was up. She said the dude shot like 3 or 4 times out of his window. Detective Nettles asked if she heard glass break. She said they saw how the glass got broken. She said she started running trying to find somewhere she can lay down. She said he heard Patrick telling the dude that he shot him. She said the dude backed up and Patrick got back in the car and went behind him. She said the dude shot like 3 or 4 times again. She said when she got up, the dude was gone. She said when the dude left, She saw her car with the lights on. She said she ran over to Patrick and he was bleeding close to the truck he was seated. She said a few seconds later, she saw some policemen and she flagged them down, and they came over there. She said that was as much as she can remember. Detective Barton asked her what the car of the suspect looked like. She said it was white or silver Nissan Versa or Sentra or something like that. Detective Nettles asked her if the car intentionally hit them. She said she doesn't think the car intentionally hit them. Detective Barton asked her if she was able to see what the guy looked like. She said he was a white guy with a low haircut and he had a beard. Detective Nettle asked him how old did the guy look to her. She said the guy looked between 25 to 35 years. He asked if she was able to get the plate number of the car, but she said she couldn't. Detective Barton showed her the gold ring they found at the incident scene and asked her who owned it. She said the ring is for Patrick. Detective Barton told her he was going to allow her to go. He said he will inform her as soon as they have new information. While detectives were looking at the scene of the incident on their computer, a detective noticed that there were many gas stations around the scene of the incident. He told Detective Barton that one of those stations should have the video of the incident. 4 hours in, Detective Barton and Detective Nettles arrived at a gas station in the area where the hit and run happened. The clerk pulls up surveillance video from around the time of the 911 call. 1 minute after the 911 call came in, the victim's Nissan Armada chases a small sedan. Detective Barton downloaded the surveillance video to review with the homicide team. 5 hours in, the team could not determine the make and model of the suspect's car. Detective Barton reached out to the cyber unit with the hope that they can track down more video of the suspect's vehicle. Barton told the cyber unit that they have the video of the actual day. He said it could be a G6, but he is not 100% sure. He told the cyber unit that the car was driven by a white male. He told them to send him whatever they got through an email. When he dropped the call, he told his team members that he needed something that will make him identify who the white male was and the type of car he was driving. The next morning, while detectives wait to see a cyber who can come up with anything, the team returned to the crime scene to canvass the neighborhood. At a house down the street, a detective got a video in the house of a lady. The video showed the suspect's car first. After that, there was a brief pause before the victim's car appeared. A few seconds after the victim's car appeared, it went out of frame. Then, the suspect's car appeared with lights off. The detective said the car looks like a light gray car. 15 hours after Patrick was gunned down, Detective Barton met with traffic homicide investigator John Mixon and crime scene investigator Jason Bullock, hoping to find evidence that will help identify the suspect's vehicle. Mixon went ahead and brought the lens for broken pieces, and he wants to compare them to the Armada. He said if the taillight doesn't match, investigators may be able to identify the type of car it came from. When he did, the pieces fit the Armada, which meant that the investigators could not get a lead from the car. With no leads from the damage to the victim's car, the team turns to the car that was struck on the street. Fragments of paint on the car could reveal information about the car that hit it. When they carried out the test, it showed that the paint appears to have come from the victim's car. 1 hour later, the search for more videos paid off. Detectives got a break. They got a very clear video of the suspect's vehicle before the shooting. 1 minute before the accident, a surveillance camera captured a silver Toyota Corolla driving behind the victim's car. He said it was consistent with what they were looking for. Detective Barton follows up with the unit that uncovered the video. Detective Barton asked them if they could track the vehicle. They told him that they were already doing that. He said he got them, but they haven't come up with a tag yet. They said not definitely. The cyber units were able to get a partial plate number from the video, and they have seen searching for a match. They said they will send anything they get to Detective Glenn Barton. 40 minutes later, the team found a silver Toyota Corolla registered to a man who matches the suspect's description using the partial plate number. His name is Trenton Thornton. 31 years old Trenton Thornton has no prior convictions. Trenton was a former Marine who did 2 tours in Afghanistan. Detective Barton said they will go to the area and try to put their eyes on the vehicle. A detective said the vehicle should have a lot of damage to it. He said if they see the vehicle, then they will take the suspect into custody. Detective Glenn Barton said he would be lying if he didn't tell the team that he is reserved than usual about confronting someone that is well trained like the suspect. He said the suspect has seen real combat and you have in the back of your mind if he has PTSD or if he is dealing with some serious trauma. He said all his actions indicate that he is very dangerous. He said he was going to send out the address, and then if they put their eyes on the vehicle, they will just hit the house. Detective Glenn Barton and Detective Julius Nettles, backed by several members of the homicide team, headed out to Trenton's last known address. They passed the house, but they didn't find the silver Toyota in the driveway. They decided to knock on the door to check if the suspect was at home. With no answer to the door, Detective Barton approached a neighbor. He asked the neighbor if he could give him their phone number. The neighbor gave Detective Barton the phone number of Trenton's mother. The neighbor told detectives that Trenton lived there when he was growing up before joining the military. Detective Barton asked the neighbor about the personality of Trenton. The neighbor said Trenton has never done anything really bad. He said he just does stupid things. Detective Barton thanked Trenton's neighbor and left for his car. While they were walking to the car, Detective Julius asked Detective Barton what he was going to do with the phone number. Detective Barton said he would either call Trenton's mom or talk to her if she could get her son to come in, or they could get an address from 2016 other than the one they came to. 20 hours in, the team heads to the second address they found for Trenton. While they were in the car, Detective Barton said when someone is military trained, it is a whole mother ball game. He said they have to take every precaution because they don't know if he is going to be armed to the teeth, and they don't also know his tactics. He said it's just another level to an already very hard job that they have. While Detective Barton was talking to the team members in his car, he received a radio signal from other team members in another car that it appears the vehicle they are looking for is in the front yard. They also said that it appears that the vehicle has damage to the driver's side of the front window. The detectives came down from their vehicle and made their way into the compound. Detective Barton and Detective Julius went to the door while other detectives took strategic positions in the compound. A few seconds after Detective Barton and Detective Julius knocked on the door, an old woman answered. She was Trenton's grandmother. Detective Barton asked her if Trenton was in the house with her. She said she had no idea where Trenton was. Detective Barton told the old woman that if Trenton is inside, then she needs to tell them because they need to talk to him. Detective Barton asked Trenton's grandmother the last time she saw him. She said Trenton came in around 3:30 p.m. Detective Barton shouted on top of his voice asking Trenton to come out if he is in the house. A few seconds later, another member of Trenton's family came out. Detective Barton asked her where Trenton was. She told him Trenton was probably sleeping. Detective Barton asked her about the room Trenton was in. She said Trenton was sleeping in the room on the far left. Detective Barton asked her if Trenton had weapons in his room. She said Trenton has weapons. Upon hearing that, Detective Julius shouted on top of his voice telling Trenton to come outside and surrender himself to the police because the house is already surrounded. Detective Barton asked Trenton's grandmother if she has his number. She said she doesn't have his number. Detective Julius said Trenton's phone number is in the paperwork in the truck. Detective Julius told another detective to take the position of Detective Barton while he goes to the truck to search for Trenton's number. A few minutes later, Detective Barton returned with Trenton's phone number. He called the number several times, but Trenton, it was not good. Then, he called Trenton's mother. He told her that policemen have surrounded the house of her son, but he is refusing to come out. He asked her for Trenton's phone number so that he can talk to him because Trenton was in an unsafe situation. Trenton's mother said she was driving, so she cannot pull up his phone number, but she agrees to help the detectives get Trenton out. A few minutes later, Trenton's mother arrived at his house. Detective Barton told her she cannot approach the front door because of her safety. He said he wants her to call her son and let him know that they are policemen, and they are there for investigation. When Trenton's mother called him and it wasn't going through, Detective Barton told her to text him. He said she should tell him that she is with the police. Trenton's mother sent him a text pleading with him to come out. He replied to his mother that he was coming out. Detective Barton told all officers to be on the alert. A few minutes after he replied to the text, Trenton came out. He came out through the front door. While he was walking outside, Detectives Barton told him to raise his hands so he can see them. Trenton eventually came out with his hands up. He was handcuffed by Detective Barton and Detective Julius and taken into their vehicle. While he wanted to enter the vehicle, he told Detective Barton that he will like to pee when they get to a convenient place. Detective Barton asked him why it took him very long to come out. He said he was dead asleep. Detective Barton applauded all officers. He told them they have done a very good job. He said a couple of hours ago they didn't have a good shot of the vehicle, and now they have the suspect and the vehicle in custody. He said the vehicle matches everything the witness said. He said he was pretty happy. After he applauded the officers, they all made their way back to the headquarters. When they got to the headquarters, Trenton was taken into a room for interrogation. After some few minutes, Detective Glenn Barton and Detective Julius Nettles entered the interrogation room where Trenton was being held. When he entered, he introduced himself and introduced Detective Julius too. Detective Barton said he is sure Trenton knew and saw what went down at his house. He said he knows Trenton knew what all that was about. He said he just want to get some of Trenton's information before they start talking. Detective Julius asked Trenton where he works. Trenton said he is a self-employed construction worker. He said sometimes he works at a welding place doing landscaping. Detective Barton asked Trenton if he has any sort of military training. Trenton said he used to be with the Marine Corps. Detective Barton asked him how long he worked with the Marine. Trenton said he worked with the Marines for 4 years. Detective Barton thanked Trenton for his service. Detective Glenn Barton said he doesn't want to waste Trenton's time. He said he wants to talk to him a little bit. He said he wants to ask him some little questions. He told Trenton that he is not under arrest. He told Trenton that he is detained. He said he is being detained so that they can talk for questioning for an investigation. Detective Julius Nettles told Trenton that the only reason why he was handcuffed is that he didn't come outside right away. Detective Barton asked Trenton if he was cool with him asking some questions. Trenton said he will hear what Detective Barton has to say, but he might not say anything back. Detective Julius Nettles told Trenton that the deal is that they are going to have a conversation with him, and he is sure Trenton knows why they were there. Detective Nettles said honestly and truly, he thinks there is an explanation for it. Detective Nettles told Trenton that they take people's rights very seriously. He said there are two things. The first is either Trenton doesn't want to talk to them or he doesn't want to talk to them without an attorney. He said it has to be that plan. Trenton said he was going to wait for an attorney. Detective Barton told Trenton to give them some minutes, and he left the interrogation room with Detective Julius Nettles. When they got outside, Detective Glenn Barton put a call through to the assistant DA and presented his case. He was able to secure a warrant for Trenton's arrest. Detective Glenn Barton and Detective Julius Nettles returned to the interrogation room where Trenton was being held. When they entered, Detective Glenn Barton told Trenton that he has been charged with murder. He told him that he cannot talk to him much about it. With 25 hours left in the first 48 hours, Trenton Thornton was charged with Patrick Edwards. Detective Glenn Barton said he wants to know Trenton's side of the story. He said he wants to know what he was thinking. He said unfortunately, he doesn't think he can get to hear Trenton's story. He said he thinks Trenton lost it. He said he thinks he was probably enraged or upset. He said Trenton might have some PTSD. He said it's very difficult to tell with Trenton because he had no emotion. He said even when he told Trenton that he has been charged with murder, he just said okay. He said he thinks Trenton just got confronted and didn't like what was about to happen and shot the victim. Trenton Thornton has been charged with murder and he is awaiting trial. When officers brought Trenton out, journalists asked him if he has anything to say concerning the crime. Trenton said no comment. He said he has nothing to say. After Trenton was driven off, Detective Glenn Barton reached out to Patrick Edwards' girlfriend. He told her that they have arrested a suspect in Patrick's case. Patrick's girlfriend could not hide her joy as she kept thanking Detective Glenn Barton. Detective Glenn Barton told her the name of the suspect is Trenton Thornton and he is going to be booked in jail for the murder of Patrick. The next morning, the team searched Trenton's bedroom for the murder weapon. The team found a handgun, military grade along with a military-grade handgun, Rifle. Detective Glenn Barton said these are two weapons capable of committing homicide. He said it's hard to know because they do not have any casings. He said he is hopeful that they will get a casing in the vehicle when they search it. He said they were going to match it and see if the ballistic comes back to being fired from the guns they saw in Trenton's house. He said Trenton had enough firepower. He said he had ammo for days. He said he just thanked God that it didn't go a different way. The search of Trenton Thornton's vehicle led to the discovery of several bullet fragments, but no casings. Ballistic tests on the fragments were inconclusive. The murder weapon is yet to be identified. 1 year after Patrick's murder, Patrick's brothers and his son gathered at a river where Patrick used to fish. They said it was what Patrick likes to do. Patrick's son said fishing with his dad was one of his favorite moments. He said he wasn't ready when his dad left him. He said he thinks about his dad every day. 11:37 p.m. in Tulsa, Oklahoma. A caller put a call through across to EMCA. As soon as the EMCA operator picked the call, he asked the caller about her emergency. The caller said her son has been shot. The operator asked the caller if her son has any serious bleeding. She replied in the affirmative. The operator told the caller to stay on the line because they already have an ambulance coming her way. Within a few minutes, the Tulsa police unit arrived at the house of the caller. They introduced themselves and the caller immediately let them in. She took them to where her son was lying. A detective asked her where the boy was shot at and she showed him. The detective noticed that the boy got one bullet to the chest and exit to the back. For homicide detectives, their chance of solving a murder is cut in half if they do not get a lead within the first 48 hours. Detective Jason White, who has been in the unit for more than 10.5 years, will lead the case, which is his 80th case. Detective Jason began his investigation immediately. He jumped into his car and headed to an area in the northwest part of the city in Osage County. He was told that the victim was shot in the driveway but managed to make it inside the house. The victim suffered gunshot wounds to the chest, arm, and leg. Doctors were unable to save him. He died of injuries. When Detective Jason White arrived at the scene of the incident, he asked Detective Ronnie Leatherman, who was among the first respondent to the incident, if they have any information. Detective Jason Leatherman said they have gotten the name of the victim. He said the name of the victim is Kim Hayes. 26 years old Kim Hayes was born and raised in Tulsa in a close-knit family. He worked for an industrial manufacturer and just celebrated his daughter's first birthday. Detective Ronnie Leatherman told Detective Jason White that they have gotten a search waiver signed by the mom. Detective Jason White asked him if the mom stays there. Detective Ronnie said the house belongs to the mom. He said the mom and the victim's girlfriend live there. The detective said they saw blood trails everywhere. They found a blood trail on the side of the car and down the garage. Detective Jason asked him where the victim was found. He said the victim was found in the house. Detective Jason himself joined the detectives in the on-site investigation. When they moved to the garage where the detectives told him they found blood trails, they found a .380 gun with bloodstains on it. Detective Jason said it might be the victim's gun. A detective said maybe. When they walked down out of the garage, they found 5 casings scattered across the driveway and into the street. They also noticed that all the cartridges of the casings were .380 seconds. Detective Jason White asked if the victim has a phone. The detective told him that the victim's phone is in the driveway. He told him that he has a password for the victim's phone. The password is slime. Detective Jason White said it's an interesting password. When they took a walk further down the house, they saw a pill bottle. The name on the pill bottle is Charles Boas and it's hydrocodone. Detective Ronnie said hydrocodone is an opioid pain medication that is commonly sold on the streets. Detective Ronnie said that according to the neighbors, there has been a lot of foot traffic and vehicle traffic from the house recently. He said it's probably drug-related. Detective Jason White said he is going to holler at the witness next door. He went to the neighbor and introduced himself. He asked the neighbor what he saw. The neighbor said he was about to go to bed. He heard some argument outside and he looked out through his window. He said he saw the victim and 2 other guys tussling on the driveway. Right at the end, He said he heard gunshots which took his heart rate and everything up to a different level. He said the guy that was standing over the victim unloaded like 5 or 6 rounds and pointed blank over the victim. Detective Jason White asked him what the victim did next. He said his wife thought she saw him get up, and he think he was able to return fire. Detective Jason asked him what the guys looked like. He said they looked African American. They were tall. One was probably about 61. He said it wasn't the first time that he has heard people coming in and out. Detective Jason White asked him if there has a lot of traffic in that apartment. He said there has been a lot of traffic over the last year or so, but he thought since he had a baby, he has cleaned some things up. Detective White thanked the neighbor and went back to his team members. He told his team members that what he understood from what the neighbor said is that 2 guys were fighting, and the suspect was over the top of him. One of the suspects was shot into him multiple times. He said he calmed down or something after he had a baby. Detective Jason said the victim's mom and girlfriend will be taken downtown. He said he wants to talk to them and get their story as quickly as possible. When they arrived at the homicide headquarters, the victim's mom and his girlfriend were taken into different interrogation rooms. Detective Jason told Detective Ronnie that he thinks they should talk to the girlfriend first because she will probably have more information than the mom. When they entered the interrogation room where the victim's girlfriend was being kept, Detective Jason White introduced himself and introduced Detective Ronnie Leatherman. Detective Jason White said he is sorry that she is going through all of this. He said he wants her to shed some light and help him out on the murder. He said he wants her to tell him what happened tonight. The victim's girlfriend said it was like every other night. They had a night routine with their daughter. She said their daughter ate dinner at around 7:45 and they laid her down. She said when it was time to lay her down, they lay down together. She said as soon as their daughter fell asleep, Kim hopped up and left the room because he was already texting someone while they were laying their daughter to sleep. She said Kim went straight to the garage and opened the garage door. She said she went to the bathroom to grab a cigarette and she went out because that is what she does. She said suddenly she heard loud noises. She said she knows what a gunshot sounds like. She said heard up to 9 gunshots. She said the gunshots came repeatedly. She said at that point she knew Kim was in trouble. She said she opened the door and Kim started yelling, "Get down! Get down." She said she heard the shots and all she saw Kim do was just darts to the threshold of the garage door and just over and over. She said that was when she noticed blood and Kim immediately turned around and looked at her. She said he was telling her to call the ambulance. She said blood was coming out of his mouth as he was coming down the stairs. She said she went and grabbed towels because his mom met them at the stairs. She said she grabbed a towel and she applied pressure on the wound. She said she placed his head on her lap and she kept hitting him as hard as she could. She said every time he closed his eyes, she kept telling him, "You're strong, you can do this. You're dumb, you've done this before." She said he was shot 3 times in the stomach last year. Detective Ronnie asked Kim's girlfriend what he was doing on his phone before he went to sleep. She said she asked Kim who he was texting and he told her it was his friend Charles. She said she told him that she has never heard that name before. She asked him who is Charles and she asked him what was going on. Kim said Charles was supposed to bring him some Roxy's to sell. Detective Ronnie asked her what Roxy's are. She said Roxy's are OxyContin. She guessed. She said Roxy's was one of the main things that Kim sells. Detective Jason asked her if Kim told her that Charles was coming with somebody else. She said he did not. She said when he was shot and his head was on her lap, she said she kept asking him Charles' last name. She said Kim kept trying to say something but she couldn't understand what it was. She said she kept asking him Charles who, and he said Charles Boras. She said now she knows his bows. Detective Jason asked her how she knew. She said she messaged a childhood friend of Kim. She said they went to school together when they were kids. She said they all went to Central together. She said Kim's friend told her that Charles Bowes is an old friend from high school. She said she was trying to put it together in her head just because she is familiar with living a very bad lifestyle before she got pregnant. She said she changed her lifestyle around. She said Kim did too for the most part. She said right after they had their baby, she and Kim went from being close friends to being lovers. She said Kim gave her a promise ring before their baby turned a year old. She said they were on their way to getting to know their place. Detective John commended her for being extremely strong because she has helped them with her statement. Detective Jason White turns to Kim's mother. He asked her what happened that night. She said she was downstairs watching Longmire. She said she just heard some rat-a-tat-tat bangs. She said the next thing she knew was they were coming in the front door and Kim was saying he has been shot. Detective Jason asked her if she heard Kim talk about who shot him. She said she did not. He was just in a lot of pain. Detective Jason asked her if she knows anything about what Kim has been doing or if he has a lot of people come over for various reasons. She said no because there is a lot she doesn't know. She said she doesn't know what her son has been involved in, but he promised her that he was not involved in anything. She said she is not saying he is innocent or not, but Kim was doing fine because he was working every day. Detective Jason asked her about her relationship with Kim's girlfriend. She said they are good. She said she was homeless when she picked her and brought her to her house. Detective Jason said she has to be strong for both Kim's girlfriend and her granddaughter. He said she will be living in her house temporarily. She said no problem. She said her focus is KH low. She wants to know when she can see him. Detective Jason said she cannot see him in the medical examiner's office. She can only see him in a funeral home. He said he cannot imagine what she is feeling right now, but his goal is for justice to be served. He said she should not hesitate if anything comes up. Using Kim's password, Sergeant Nathan Schilling scanned through his text messages leading up to the murder. He said the text message showed that Kim was bringing a pill bill. He had concerned about whether they were real or not. Kim said he has a baby now, so he isn't playing any game. He said he is a number guy and as long as the numbers stay straight, they are going to eat. The person that was coming to meet him replied to Kim that what did he mean because he is confused. The person said they are real and there is no press. Kim told him he wants to know when he is pulling up so that he can raise the garage door. Detective Jason asked Sergeant Nathan that what time did the text come in. Sergeant Nathan said it was around 10:51 p.m. He pulled up at 10:52, 10:53 bet. He said that was his last going. Detective Jason said that's the guy. Sergeant Nathan said the number the victim was having a back and forth with who was going to deliver pills checks to Charles Bowes. Detective Ronnie pulled up a picture of Charles when he was arrested last year. 27 years old Charles Bowes is a local rap artist and has no prior felony murder convictions. Detective Jason said they know that Charles Bowes was there. His pill bottle was on the street. He said they have to build a case up. He said he wants to be able to arrest the cat. He said there was another guy that was him too. Detective Ronnie said they may have to watch a body cam. Detective Jason hopes body cam footages from first responders will turn up a lead. He said if the video shows the victim mentioning that name, he thinks they are good from that. Detective Ronnie finally got the officer's body camera video uploaded. He said they are going to watch it and see if the victim gives any more details about what happened. When they watched it, they saw where the victim mentioned the name of Charles Bowes. Detective Jason said it's a powerful piece of evidence. He said he thinks it falls under the category of dying declaration. Detective Ronnie said, with a dying declaration, the person who's dying will have to talk to them and tell them there is a good chance he was going to die. He will be asked if he understands what he was saying and the person will say yes, he is about to die. But this is the person who did it. Detective Ronnie said if it passes through those stages, then it can be used as evidence in court. He said hopefully they will be able to use it as a dying declaration. He said he doesn't think it is going to be an issue as far as getting Charles Bowes arrested. He said there was a pill bottle where the shooting happened that had his name. Also, he was the last person Kim was talking to. He thinks that they have plenty piece of evidence to get him. Detective Jason said they will put everything together the next morning, and they will submit it to the DA so that they can get an arrest warrant. Detective Ronnie said there is still the question of the second person when the shooting happened. He said just because Charles was there doesn't necessarily mean he was the shooter. He said it could be the other guy that they do not know about. 38 hours after Kim was murdered, Detective Jason said they have gotten the warrant signed for Charles Bowes. He said he has notified the Fugitive Warrants Unit to start the hunt for Charles Bowes. The team headed to several known addresses for Charles Bowes, but one after the other, they came up empty. In the first 48, Tulsa Homicide responded to the murder of Kim Hayes, who was gunned down in his mother's driveway. Detectives learned that an eyewitness saw two men struggling with Kim before one of them shot him. They discovered that Kim made a dying declaration naming Charles Bowes as one of the suspects, but they have been unable to track him down. 18 hours into the search for Charles Bowes, Detective Jason said the fugitive warrant guys said they have been setting up surveillance on the potential house where Charles Bowes may have been staying. They have set up surveillance in that location and apparently, they have followed him to another location. He said they have him spotted. He is presently sitting in a car. He said they are maintaining surveillance at the moment. The fugitive warrant finally arrested Charles. Detective Jason said whether he is the shooter or not, they will probably get to know. He said Charles doesn't seem like somebody that is a criminal type. Detective Jason said he wants to know who the second guy is, and he is hopeful that Charles Bowes will tell him. Nearly 3 days after Kim was murdered, Charles Bowes was brought to homicide. As soon as he entered homicide headquarters, he was taken into an interrogation room for questioning. Detective Jason White immediately moved to the room to interrogate Charles. When Detective Jason entered the room, Charles was lying on the floor. Detective Jason told Charles to sit up. Charles disagreed. He said he wants a lawyer. Detective Ronnie entered the investigation room and told Charles that they need his fingerprint and his DNA. Detective Jason told his team members that Charles said he wouldn't speak to them. Detective Ronnie said the witness who lived next door saw some sort of a physical altercation. He said if you look at Charles' hand, it was taped up. Detective Jason commended Detective Ronnie for good observation, and he told him he was going to photograph that. Detective Jason said Charles will have to be transported to Osage County. When the detectives that were going to transport Charles entered the interrogation room, they saw him doing something. The detectives asked Charles what he was doing. Charles said he was spelling something out. When he was taken out, detectives went to the room to see what Charles was spelling. They noticed that he spelled out innocent. Detective Jason White said the evidence they have does not support that right now. With no leads on the second suspect, detectives headed back to Kim's neighborhood with the hope that they will get someone in Kim's neighborhood that might have the surveillance video from the night that he was murdered. They looked at all the videos of the people in Kim's neighborhood, but they didn't get anything. 2 months go by without any leads, and then detectives got some welcome news. Detective Jason told his team members that they will go to Pawhuska to visit Charles Bowes. He said Charles' attorney reached out and indicated to them that Charles was willing to tell them the story. Detective Jason said he thinks Charles has seen that the case against him is incredibly strong, and he doesn't have much of a choice than to try to have a little self-preservation. Detective White and Detective Ronnie Leatherman headed to Pawhuska in Osage County where Charles Bowes has been held. When Detective Jason met Charles, he introduced himself, and he told Charles that his attorney reached out to him that he wanted to tell them the story about what happened. Charles claimed Kim put him in touch with a man who was going to buy his prescription drugs. Detective Jason asked Charles how he got played. Charles said he gave Kim some pills, and he gave him an envelope with some napkins in it. Detective Jason said, and he left before he realized that he has been screwed over. He said yes. Detective Jason asked him how much they were talking about that his buddy ended up taking him for. Charles said it was like $600 or $700. Charles said, so he hit Kim up to tell him who the dude was because he was going to beat him up for scamming him. He said Kim didn't want to give up the dude because he didn't want to be in the middle of it. Detective Jason told Charles that there is a lot of messages on Kim's phone between the both of them about pills. He said both of them were discussing a transaction. Charles said it wasn't a transaction. He said he told Kim that if he gets the dude over there and lets him get on one-on-one with the guy, he will let him have the pills. He said he told Kim that he set him up. He said he told Kim that they have known each other for a long time. He shouldn't have done what he did. He said after that, he punched Kim and they started fighting. He said he ended up slamming Kim on the ground. He said Kim had his arms locked into where he couldn't move his arm. Detective Jason said what happened after that. Charles said his cousin pulled him off Kim. When he pulled him off Kim got up and started reaching like he had something. He said then he heard shots go off and he took off running. Detective Jason asked Charles that who was his cousin, that kinfolk that came over there with him. Charles said his name is Lawrence. Detective Jason asked Charles if his cousin was worried after the incident happened. Charles said he knew he was worried because he knows he is not that type of dude. Charles said it was like some type of situation, but he hopes he didn't screw his cousin up. Detective Jason asked Charles if he knew that Kim died. Charles said he didn't know until 2 days later. Charles said he didn't know anything happened because Kim was popping back. Detective Jason thanked him and he left. Back at Homicide, Detective Jason told his team members that he thinks Charles was minimizing some of his involvement. He said he identified his cousin as Lawrence Mitchell. Detective Charles said he is going to pull up Lawrence Mitchell. 23 years old Lawrence Mitchell performed local gigs as a rapper. He has a previous conviction for possession of a firearm. Lawrence was arrested 4 months after the murder for failing to appear in court on an unrelated firearm charge. Detective Jason said they will try to talk to Lawrence. Lawrence was transported from Tulsa County Jail down to Homicide. Detective Jason said it took a lot of time to get the warrant issued for him because of COVID and other things. He said once that happened, they went down to the jail to go pick him up. He said he hopes that Lawrence will tell them what's up. Detective Jason and Detective Ronnie went into the interrogation room to have a chat with Lawrence. When they entered, Detective Jason told Lawrence that he knows his cousin and he has spoken to him. He said he just wants Lawrence to tell him what happened. Lawrence said he would never have left the room out of his house if Charles didn't call him. Detective Jason asked Lawrence that who was the person that called him. Lawrence said his big cousin Charles Bowes. He said he got a call from his cousin asking him if he can ride with him. He said Charles also asked him if he can bring the pistol. He said he asked Charles what he needed the pistol for. He said Charles said he just needs his help. He said he got into the car with Charles, and they went over there. He said he was in the car when he heard some altercation. Detective Ronnie asked Lawrence if he knew the background of the altercation. He said he just knew the altercation was over some pills. He said he thinks Charles owed Kim some money. Detective Jason asked Lawrence if Charles owed Kim some money or vice versa. Lawrence said vice versa. Lawrence said Kim took of Charles, telling Charles that he wasn't paying him. Lawrence said he was sitting in the car looking at them as they were fighting. He said he was like they will soon be done. Lawrence said the fight went on for like 7 minutes. He said he got out of the car and he told his cousin that they need to break that up. He said it was that time that the neighbors started coming outside. He said he told his cousin that they should get out of there. He said he told his cousin that he has a pistol on him and he doesn't want to get caught because he is already fighting a case. He said Charles let Kim go. As soon as he did that, he upped on him. He said he asked his cousin what he was doing. He said Charles told him that he was threatening with a pistol. He said Charles shot. He weaved. He shot again and he weaved. Then he shot him. Detective Jason asked Lawrence how many times he shot. Lawrence said he doesn't know, but it was like 4 times. He said he already had mines out before Charles drew. He said when Charles drew the shot, that was when he emptied his. Detective Jason asked Lawrence if he ever spoke to Charles after that. He said Charles came the next day. Charles was like he can deal with it. He said he felt bad. It shouldn't have ended that way. Lawrence said he takes full responsibility. He said his cousin has a whole lot of family. He said he didn't have to talk to them, but he was just trying to get the heat off his cousin. Detective Ronnie told Lawrence that he has a lot of respect for him for stepping up to do the right thing. He said he wished Lawrence had done it in May. Lawrence told Detective Ronnie that he fell in love. He said he doesn't want her to know what's going on because he didn't want to put her in this situation. He said he was trying to bond out and get married because he didn't know what it feels like. He said now he has to tell her what's going on for real. Detective Jason appreciated Lawrence for being kind and left the interrogation room. Charles Bowes was charged with first-degree murder and he is awaiting trial. Lawrence Mitchell was charged with first-degree murder and possession of a firearm. He is awaiting trial. The First 48 Hours, Season 22, Episode 3, A Beautiful Life. Story based on UND, public news reports, and police reports. At exactly 9 a.m. in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a caller called 911 to report an emergency. When the 911 operator answered the call, he asked the caller if she needed police, fire, or medical. The caller said he needs police and probably medical. The operator asked the caller for his address. The caller said it's behind a field 129th of McDonald's and Admiral. The operator asked the caller what was going on. The caller said a kid lying in the middle of a dirt road. He said the victim is a teenager and he is lying face down. The 911 operator asked the caller if the teenager is moving or breathing. The caller said he is not moving and breathing. He said he thinks the teenager is dead. Detective Chase Calhoun, Detective Jason, and other team members headed to Tulsa. Detective Chase told his team members in the car that they received a call from an unknown person. He said the caller stated that they found a body next to a dirt road in the woods. Detective Jason said it's Detective Chase's first case, and he has to prove to them why they chose and initiated him. When the team arrived at the dirt road, they found the teenager lying face down just as the caller said. Detective Chase said the teenager should be 15 or 16. He asked the first respondents if they have gotten an ID for the teenager. They said they haven't. The detectives noticed bloodstains on the leg and back of the teenager's head. They also noticed that the teenager's pocket was turned on. Detective Jason said the pocket been turned on maybe due to the grabbing of the teenager's cell phone by his killer. Detective Chase asked the first respondents how long has the teenager been dropped there. Detective Jason said he thinks it's not more than a day. While detectives waited for the medical examiner, Detective Chase Calhoun spoke to the 911 caller. Detective Chase asked the 911 caller if he lives there. The 911 caller said he lives in his van. Detective asked the 911 caller if he was just cruising through the dirt road when he found the teenager. The caller replied in the affirmative. He said he was just on his way out when he saw the body lying there. Detective Chase asked the caller that when was the last time he drove through there. The caller said yesterday. Detective Calhoun asked him what time. He said 11:30 p.m. Detective Chase asked the caller if he saw the body when he drove through there the last time. He said he didn't see the body. 2 hours in, the ME discovered that the teenager was shot once in his chest. They also saw foam which the ME said could be from the inside of the car of the suspects. They noticed some marks on the body of the teenager. The ME said it looked like the boy was drugged and swabbed on his wrists and his ankles. The ME said DNA swab will be tested to look for trace evidence of a suspect. They will also take his prints back to the lab. Detective Jason said they should take photos of the victim's shoes and necklace. He said the photos will stand out for somebody. Detective Jason said the case is challenging, especially as it is the first case for Detective Chase. Detective Jason said once they find out who the teenager is, it will be 300 more pieces to the puzzle. He said after that, the family will be on board, and they will start finding out and getting leads. Detective Jason said the case will cause outrage because the boy is too young. Back at Homicide, Detective Chase Calhoun got an update from the crime lab. The crime lab was not able to identify the teenager by his fingerprints. Detective Jason said they should release the photos of the victim's shoes and necklace to the media. He said he hoped they will be able to get a lead if they do that. Detective Chase was also monitoring the city of Tulsa's 911 calls to see if anybody will call in about a missing person. The photos released by the team lead to a broadcast. An hour after the broadcast, a woman called in. She said her fiance's little brother, 16 years old Darren Wilson, has been missing since last night. Sergeant Walker, who was the detective that answered the woman's call, asked her if the victim had a Facebook page. The woman said the victim had a Facebook page in his name. When detectives searched for the victim on Facebook, they found a picture that was consistent with his eyebrows, hair, height, and weight. Detective Jason said the picture they pulled out of Facebook has to be the victim. After the search, Sergeant Walker reached out back to Darren Wilson's family. Sergeant Walker asked the victim's family if there is anyone that can identify the victim from a picture. The family members said Darren's loved ones are gathered at his mother's house. Sergeant Walker said they will be on their way to the victim's mother's house. After a few minutes, the team led by Detective Calhoun arrives at the house of the victim's mother. Detective Calhoun met Darren's sister-in-law Lajani Wilson and showed her the photo of the victim. Immediately she saw the picture, she started crying. She told Detective Chase that the person in the photo is Darren Wilson. Detective Chase consoled her and other family members. He said he knew what they have been going through since the victim was declared missing. The 16 years old Darren Wilson is known to friends and family as Dada, attended East Central High School, where he played football and competed in track and field. He had hopes of going to college and playing Division I football. Darren left behind his parents and 3 siblings. Detective Chase asked Darren's sister-in-law if Darren's mom is there. She showed Detective Chase Darren's mother. Detective Chase told Darren's mother that her son was shot. He said her son was found in a field. Darren's mother asked Detective Chase if he think Darren was dropped off in the field. Detective Chase said that is what he knows. Detective Jason approached Darren's mom where she was standing and crying. He told her that they need the family. He said they need people who might have been hanging out with Darren last night. Darren's mother said he told her he was going to play basketball. Detective Jason asked her the time Darren left home to play basketball. She said it was around 5 the previous day. She said Darren told her that he was going to spend the night with his friend. And she said okay. She said Darren didn't mention the name of his friend. She said Darren only uses his phone to send Facebook messages through Wi-Fi. Darren's mother told the detectives that they have to find the people that killed her son. Detective Jason told her if there is any way to find those people, they will do it. Then, a family friend pulled detectives aside. Detective Chase asked the family friend if he knows whether Chase has been involved with bad people. He said he doesn't know. Detective Chase asked him if he knows what Chase has been up to lately. He said he just know that Darren does a lot of trading with shoes. He said Darren has been selling sneakers to make money. He said he dropped Darren a month ago. He said Darren went out of the car, traded shoes, and he got back in. He said he doesn't know whether Darren was involved in anything bad. Detective Jason told his team members that it is obvious that there are a lot of people that love Darren. He said when you meet someone's loved one who just lost their child, it's a tragedy. He said it can instill extra motivation to want to solve it. The team entered their car and headed to homicide headquarters. While they were driving, Detective Chase said the family wasn't able to get a whole lot of information. He said he wondered how Darren was getting the shoes they said he was selling. When they got back to homicide, Detective Chase told the team members that he hopes they will be able to get some of the victims' information about some possible motives as to why somebody would want to kill him the next day. He told the team that at the end of the first day, they don't have evidence and video surveillance or witnesses. He said he believes that the case is not a sprint but a marathon. He said eventually they will get to the finish line. The next morning, Detective Calhoun got a warrant for Darren's Facebook messages, hoping to identify who Darren met with the night he went missing. 26 hours in, the team got an update from Darren's autopsy. A small caliber bullet was recovered from Darren's chest. Based on the bullet trajectory, the ME believes that the shooter was standing over the victim. Detectives believe that the pieces of foam that were found on Darren's shirt were from the car he was shot in. The MEs did not find anything in the head for injuries. Then, the team got a recorded tip from the Crime Stoppers hotline. The voice in the recording said he has information on Darren. He said he thinks Darren was set up. He said just message me. After the team listened to the recording, Detective Calhoun sent a text to the tipster, and he immediately hears back. The tipster sent a message to Detective Chasing informing him that he can talk. The tipster said he was going to meet Detective Calhoun at the strip mall. Detective Calhoun and Detective Jason immediately entered their car and headed to the strip mall to meet the tipster. When they arrived at the strip mall, they met the tipster who was already waiting for them. Detective Chase introduced himself and introduced Detective Jason too. He told the tipster that they appreciate him for calling them to give them information. The tipster said Darren was a good kid. He said he didn't like the way Darren died. Detective Chase asked the tipster how well he knew Darren. The tipster said he and Darren played football together. Detective Jason asked the tipster about the stuff that Darren got into. The tipster said he think Darren was just selling shoes. Detective Chase asked the tipster if Darren was stealing or taking stuff that does not belong to him. The tipster said he thinks Darren was stealing the shoes he was selling because he was selling shoes that were worth $200 at the rate of $100. The tipster said the night before Darren went missing, he met with Darren to buy sneakers. He said after he left Darren, he went to meet a mutual friend. He said he told his friend that he got the shoes that were with him for $100. He said his friend asked him whether he got the shoes from Darren because Darren just sent him a picture of that shoe for $100. He said Darren had a plan for the $100. He said Darren wanted to buy a small gun the next day. Detective Chase asked the tipster if Darren was going to buy the gun from his mutual friend. The tipster replied in the affirmative. He said the next day he found out that Darren was dead. Detective Chase asked the tipster if he knew whether Darren met with his friend. The tipster said he doesn't know. The tipster said once he saw the description of how Darren died, he knew it was sketchy. He said he knew his friend did something with Darren. He said after he heard of Darren's death, he tried contacting his friend, but it was his mom that picked up. He said the mom told him that his friend is not there. The tipster said he thinks Darren was set up when he was trying to buy a gun. Detective Chase appreciated the tipster and told him to give him a call if he has any information. When they returned to homicide, Detective Chase told the team that they will run on the guy that was trying to sell the gun to the victim the next day. He said they are going to solve the case. He said it is his first homicide case, so it has to happen. In the first 48 hours, Detective Chase Calhoun identified a body that was found dumped in a field as 16 years old Darren Wilson, and learned from a tipster that on the night Darren went missing, he was trying to buy a gun. Now, Detective Chase Calhoun needs to track down the young man who was going to sell the gun to Darren. 3 days in, Detective Calhoun looks up the tipster's friend and found a phone number for his mother. Detective Calhoun reached out to the mother of the tipster's friend. He told her his name and his place of work. He told her that he called about her son because he wants to talk to him. She said she hasn't seen her son since the night that Darren went missing. She said she didn't know he was gone until the next morning because he had put something in his bed to make it seem like he was there. Detective Chase asked of his cell phone. The mother said they had just taken his cell phone. She said she hasn't had any communication with him. Detective Calhoun told the mother that he is going to need her help. The mother agreed to call Detective Calhoun if she finds her son. A few hours later, the mother called Detective Calhoun that she found her son, and she brought him back home. Detective Calhoun told the mother that he is heading her way immediately. When detectives arrived at the house, the mother agreed that she will allow her son to talk at homicide. The detectives left the house with the boy and headed back to homicide. When they got to homicide, the boy was taken into an interrogation room for questioning. Detective Jason and Detective Chase were the detectives that entered the room to interrogate him. When they entered, Detective Chase introduced himself and introduced Detective Jason. He asked the boy if he knows why he was there talking to them. He said it's because Darren is dead. Detective Chase asked the boy that when was the last time he hung out with Darren. He said he hung out with Darren a couple of weeks ago before school ended. He said the last time he saw Darren was about a month ago, but they talked on Tuesday and Wednesday. Detective Jason asked the boy what he and Darren talked about. He said he needs him to be 100% honest with him. The boy said Darren was trying to buy a gun and he knew some people that were selling guns. He said Darren called him and told him that he has $100 and he needed a pistol. He said around 8 p.m. on Wednesday. He talked with Darren. He said he told Darren that he doesn't know if he can get the pistol, and he pushed the away from the conversation about the gun. He said that was the last time he spoke to Darren. Detective Jason asked him what happened next. The boy said he heard that Darren died around 2 p.m. on Thursday. Detective Chase told the boy that it looks a little bit funny that he and Darren were talking about buying a gun, and then Darren disappeared. And he also disappeared. Detective Jason asked the boy if he understands how it looks like, and he replied in the affirmative. Detective Jason said what it looks like. The boy said it looks bad. Detective Chase told the boy that they need to figure out what happened that night. The boy said what happened that night was that he never talked to Chase again. Detective Chase asked the boy where he went to when he left his mom's house that night. He said he went over to sleep at a friend's house. Detective Chase asked for the phone number of the friend, and he gave him. Immediately, detectives collected the phone number. They stepped out of the interrogation room. Detective Calhoun called the friend to check the story of the boy. Detective Calhoun asked the friend if the boy was there overnight. The friend said that the boy was there overnight. Detective Chase and Detective Jason returned to the interrogation room after fact-checking his claim that he was at his friend's house throughout the night. Detective Chase asked him if he was familiar with DNA. He said he is familiar with it. Detective Chase said what he can do now is that he will take a buccal swab from the boy. He asked the boy if he is cool with it. He said he is cool with it. Detective Chase told the boy to open his mouth. When the boy opened his mouth, he collected the swab he needed for the DNA test. After Detective Chase took the swab, he asked the boy why Darren needed a pistol. He said he doesn't know. Detective Chase asked him if Darren had a beef with someone. He said Darren doesn't have because Darren was just one of the laid-back people. He said Darren was an outgoing type, so he had a lot of friends. He said Darren just wanted money. Detective Chase asked the boy where Darren was getting money for all the shoes he was selling. He said he doesn't know. Detective Chase asked if he knows whether Darren was hitting licks on people. He said he thinks Darren usually hit a house that has no occupant. Detective Chase asked if it was like breaking into a house, and the boy said yes. As day 3 continues, one of Darren's family members called detectives with a potential lead. He said words on the street were that Darren reached out to a second man looking to buy a gun. He said Darren met with the guy the night before he died. Corporal Nathan Schillings followed up on the lead. He got to know that the suspect is wanted in a shooting. He got to know that police had stopped a suspect couple of months ago after his warrant came out, but he ran from the police, and he has been on the run since then. Detective Calhoun called the warrant squad to try and bring the man in on his unrelated warrant. 12 more days went by with no sign of the second man that Darren tried to buy a gun from. Detective Calhoun was in his office when he got a call from the crime lab. The crime lab told Detective Calhoun that DNA from an unknown male was found on Darren's ankle, but it doesn't match the DNA of the first young man that Darren tried to buy a gun from. 15 days into the investigation and desperate for leads, an inmate from a neighboring city jail claiming to have information about the murder reached out to Detective Calhoun. The inmate claimed that the second man that Darren wanted to buy a gun from asked his father to hide a pistol for him. The inmate claimed that the potential suspect left the gun at a motel where his father stays. She said the gun could be related to the murder. Detective Calhoun hopes that they can put pressure on the father to tell them where his son is. 6 hours later, with a search warrant in hand, the team stakes out the father's motel room. Warrant's detectives spotted the father approaching his room. Detective Calhoun radioed his team that he wants a couple of guys to go ahead and get up on the door of the suspect's father so that he doesn't get back out of the room. He said he will be right behind them. As soon as the suspect's father entered the room, Detectives approached the door and told him to open his door. The team handcuffed the suspect's father and searched his room. Detectives found drugs, but they didn't find a possible murder weapon. The team arrested the father for the drugs they found in his room. Detective told the father that they will let him go if he can tell them where his son is. Detective Jason said he is hopeful that the father will shed more light on where his son is. When Detective Calhoun interrogated the father, he agrees to help detectives track his son. The dad told detectives that he was going to check back some things and get back to them. Detective Chase said he hopes the dad comes up with something concrete. 3 days after detectives spoke with the father, he gave them a location for his son. The detective met his son at the location, and they brought him in on his outstanding warrants. Detective Calhoun entered the investigation room where the boy was being held, and he introduced himself to Bai. Detective Calhoun noticed that the boy was crying, and he asked him why he was crying. Detective Chase told the boy that the reason why he wants to talk to him is about Darren. Detective Chase asked the boy if he was with Darren the night he died. He said he wasn't with him because he hasn't seen him for over a month. He said Darren was like a blood brother to him. He said he is the last person that will try to hurt him. Detective Chase asked the boy if there is any reason why his DNA will be on Darren's body. He said no. Detective Chase asked him if he will be willing to give him a swab. He said he is ready to give Detective Chase everything he needs right now. Detective Chase asked him if he knew the person that killed Darren. He said he doesn't know. He said all H was ready to tell Detective Chase all he knew about Darren. He said he learned about Darren's murder the day his body was discovered. He said that his girlfriend tried contacting him through Facebook the night before he was murdered. He said he looked at his Facebook and he saw Darren's message asking him if he knows where he can get any tools at the rate of $150. Detective Chase asked the boy about his Facebook page. He said he will give Detective Chase his password if he wants to access his Facebook. Detective Chase asked the boy that he heard that Darren has been hitting licks lately. He said that was how Darren got the shoes he sells. He said that was what he knew about him. Detective Chase told the boy to open his mouth so that he can get his swab. After collecting the swab, Detective Chase told him that he is going to jail that night because of all the warrants. He said he knew. Detective Chase left the room and took the swab to the medical lab. The second man's DNA was compared to the sample that was found on Darren's ankle, but it didn't match. Finally, 13 months into the investigation, Tulsa PD brought someone in who claimed that they heard information about Darren's murder. When he was brought to homicide, Detective Jason and Detective Calhoun went to the room where he was kept to interrogate the witness. When they entered, Detective Calhoun introduced himself and introduced Detective Jason. Detective Calhoun asked the witness that he heard that he said he had information about a homicide that happened a year ago. The witness said they heard a man admitting to picking Darren up. He said Darren and the man were in the back seat of the vehicle when the man shot Darren. Detective Jason asked the witness what the suspect did with Darren. The witness said they heard the suspect and his friends dump Darren in an area that matches up with where Darren was found. Detective Calhoun asked for the suspect's name. The witness gave Detective Calhoun the suspect's first name and Facebook profile. Detective Calhoun left the interrogation room to look up the suspect in the database. According to their records, the suspect was recently arrested with a small caliber gun. A detective said that could be the murder weapon. The suspect was released from custody, but his gun was still in police evidence. Detective Chase said he has to follow up with the crime lab for some testing on the firearm to see if they can get a ballistic match. He said if it matches, then, based on the story that they were given, it will be enough evidence to get an arrest warrant issued for the potential suspect. 2 months later, the gun did not match the murder weapon. Detective Calhoun will put out a bolo for the suspect with a warrant to collect his DNA. Then, nearly 2 years after Darren's murder, Detective Calhoun was out working on another case when he got a call from patrol. The suspect finally turned up when the patrol pulled him for a traffic violation. Detective Chase headed to where the patrol team detained the suspect. When he got there, the suspect was sitting in the back seat of the patrol team's car. Detective Chase knocked on the mirror of the car and told the suspect to come down. Detective Chase showed the suspect a search warrant for his DNA. Detective Chase told the suspect to open his mouth, and he collected the swab he needed. After collecting the swab, Detective Chase asked the suspect if he was interested in going downtown to talk to him about a homicide. He said he wasn't interested. Detective Chase said he will probably be seeing him soon. He told him to take care of himself, and he entered his car and drove off. 2 days later, Detective Calhoun got a word from the lab. They told him that the suspect's DNA did not match the DNA that was found on Darren's ankle. Detective Calhoun said he is disappointed. He said it doesn't mean that the suspect was not the killer, but he needs to reassess the case and look at what they got. Detective Calhoun worked the case for 2 more solid years without any leads. The case remained unsolved. Detective Calhoun said he wants the public to know the case is still an active investigation. He urged anyone that has information to call the tip line. Nearly 4 years after Darren was killed, his family still hopes someone knows something that will help detectives solve the case. 3:58 a.m. in Tulsa, Oklahoma at an apartment complex on the north side. A woman called 911 and reported that 2 people were shot in her apartment. When police and EMS arrived, they found a young man who has been shot outside the yard and rushed him to the ER. But when they entered the apartment, they found Darius Kirkland in a back bedroom dead. 8 years veteran homicide, Detective John will lead the investigation. When he arrived at the scene of the incident, he interrogated other officers who got there before him. He asked a detective that what they have. The detective said it was an apartment bleep, and the name of the guy that they found dead is Darian Kirkland. 23 years old Darius Kirkland was born in St. Louis, Missouri, but raised in Claremore, Oklahoma, and Tulsa. He dreamt of becoming a gospel rapper and once tried out for an American Idol. Darian Kirkland left behind his father, 5 siblings, and a young son. A detective told Detective John that the other person that was shot in the arm is a 21-year-old boy called Isaiah Anderson. He told him that Isaiah has a graze wound to his left arm and shot at his right. He told him that he has been taken to the hospital and he is in a stable condition. Detective John asked the detective if they have been able to get Isaiah to speak. The detective said because he was heavily medicated, they were unable to get him to talk. Darian Kirkland had a single gunshot wound to his back. Near his body, detectives found 6 9mm shell casings. They found a bullet hole right through the mirror. They found a bullet hole in the bedroom closet and a puddle of blood on the floor. A detective said it could be from the dude that got shot. Detective John said there is a real strong chance that both of them shot at one another. Detective John said he wants to know where the gun is. He said he wants to know where the round from his back came from. In the hallway, detectives found another 9mm shell casing. Detective John addressed other team members when he came out of the apartment. He said right now they have one deceased male that is located in the bedroom on the floor shot. He said they have another guy in the closet that appears to be shot and survived. He said the next step is to get his side of the story and see what he can add to what they already have. While Detective John was about to end his talk, a detective told him that there is a girl who is on lease and it's her apartment with her mother. He said the mother is not there, but she is there with Adali's nears. She told the officers that they were inside when the shooting happened. Detective John asked who she was. The detective who informed him about her arrival said she is the girlfriend of Isaiah. Detective John said they need to get them downtown. He thinks they can get more to the story from them. They all entered the vehicle and drove to homicide headquarters. As soon as they arrived at headquarters, the 911 caller was taken into a room for interrogation. Detectives head in to interview her. When they entered, Detective Brown introduced himself along with his colleague, Detective White. Detective Brown asks her about her age. She said she is 18. Detective Brown told her that there is an individual that lives in her apartment, but he is now deceased. He asked her if she has heard. She said his name is Darius Kirkland. He asked her who Darius Kirkland is to her. She said he was a close friend. Detective Brown told her that they are trying to find out how it happened that he was found dead in her apartment. She said she will explain how it started. She said her friend Adali's had her little boyfriend, the one that got shot in the arm. She said before all of this happened, Isaiah had gone outside with all of them, with whoever he was out there with. She says shortly before the shooting, Isaiah, the surviving victim, went out to the parking lot with Kirkland and some other men from the complex. He said they were all talking about robbing her boyfriend. Detective Brown said who the them she is referring to is. She said, Darian Kirkland. She said she doesn't know the names of others. She just knows their faces. She said she told them no. She said she came in and told Adali's that they were trying to rob him. Detective Brown said asked her if she overheard it and told Isaiah that they were going to rob him. She said yes. She said Adali's called in Isaiah and told him to come inside. She said Darius came and juiced out and was just tripping. Detective Brown asked her what Darius was saying. She said he was in there talking about how he was going to rob her friend, and the guy was there saying he doesn't have anything. She said Darius was pointing a gun at him. She said that was when her friend Adali's jumped in front of Isaiah, and she was like, if he was going to shoot him, then he has to shoot her too. She said she kept saying to Darian that what he was doing. She said she told him to just get out and go. She said she was trying to push the gun away from him, but he kept putting it in his pocket and bringing it out back. She said they ended up getting Darian Kirkland into the living room. She said he was in her back room with her door closed. She said they were all trying to keep him from going back there, but he bum rushed back there. She said they were all holding him, trying to get him back, and then he closed the door. Detective Brown asked her who was inside the bedroom. She said it was Darian Kirkland and Isaiah. She said she and Adali's were trying to push the door open. She said the door was unlocked, but he was pushing on the door so they couldn't get it open. She said when she barely got it open, all she heard was boom, boom, boom. She said all she heard were shots. She said Adali's went there to grab her boyfriend to make sure he was fine. She said he was hiding in the closet. She said she got over to get on Darian and she met him lying on the ground and he couldn't breathe. She said he was gasping for air. Detective Brown asked her what happened after that. Detective White said 2 people were in the room and both of them got shot. He said, did Isaiah defend himself or what happened? She said she cannot blame anyone because she doesn't know what happened. Detective White asked her who took the gun. She said she doesn't have an idea. Detective White asked her if there was anything she could add to clear this up a little bit. She said she wished she could. The officer who drove the 911 caller from the scene says she may have left something out about Adali's. He said she told him that if people tell the truth and the evidence, they will go to jail. Detective John thanked the detective for informing him. Detective John immediately returned to the interrogation room where Adali's was been held. He said he wants to ask her something real quick. He said when she was been transported to homicide headquarters, she said something about telling the truth. He said the statement she made that if people tell the truth and the evidence, she will go to jail. What does that mean? He said he wants her to be honest with him. She said she doesn't want to do it. Detective John said it doesn't matter at this time because she has to tell the truth. She said she doesn't know where the guns are, but she is sure that Adali's shot Darian Kirkland. Detective John asked him if she saw Adali's shoot Darian. She said she didn't see her shot, but she saw her with a gun. Detective John said he wants her to describe that statement clearly because it is a big deal. She said they were trying to kick the door, and Adali shot through the door. Detective John asked her where Adali's arm was when she shot. She said she doesn't know. She said it could have been like cracked or something. She said it wasn't all that way open because she didn't see him hit the ground. Detective asked her why Adali's shot Darian. She said Adali's shot Darian because he was trying to rob her boyfriend. Detective John asked her the type of gun Adali's had. She said she doesn't know. She said what she knows is that Adali's killed Darian Kirkland. Detective John left the interrogation room and joined his team members. He explained to them what Adali's told him. A detective said if all she said is true, and that was what happened, and if the victim pulled out a gun and was pointing at people and was acting stupid, they might have a justifiable shooting. A few minutes later, Detective Brown got a phone call from crime scene detective Kyle Aronowitz, who was still processing the scene. Kyle Aronowitz told Detective John that they measured the bullet trajectory. He said everything was at an upward angle. He said it all went up through and up the closet. He said the guy was shooting from the ground up. He said he was down on the ground when he was shooting at the dude in the closet. Detective John said identified Darian was on the ground when he was shooting, which means he was probably shot at first by Adali's. He said it means that there is more to the story. He told his team members that he will return to the interrogation room and see what Adali's has to say. When he entered, the first question he asked her was her age. She said she is 20 years old. Detective John called Adali's by her surname, which is Nears, and he said they are trying to unravel what happened. Adali's said she is interested in knowing what happened too. Detective John said she was there but they weren't there. She said all she knows is that Darian Kirkland showed up on some type of PCP and cracked drugs. She said she doesn't know what he was on, but he was pointing guns at everyone including her. She said he cocked it and pointed it at Isaiah, and she jumped in front of him. She said she told him to chill out and he told her he will shoot her too. She said Darian and Darius ran back with him and shut the door. She said that was where her foot hurt because they were trying to collect the gun from him. She said the next thing she heard was pop, pop. She said she thought Isaiah was dead, but he wasn't. She said she checked his pulse and he was still alive, so she tried pulling him out. She said she forgot who called 911 and that's all she knows. Detective John said they do not dispute that her boyfriend was trying to get shot by Darian Kirkland. He said what they are trying to figure out is how Darian Kirkland got shot and killed. He said just because it's been said that people believed that Darian Kirkland was trying to rob Isaiah. Adali's interjected and said he was. Detective John said that is what she hasn't talked about. Adali said she missed that part. She said what happened was that Darian came in and pointed a gun at her, and he said you told him I'm trying to rob him. And she said yes she did. Detective John asked her what the gun looked like. She said she knows nothing about guns, but it looked like a handgun. She said she called Darian and told him to think about his son. She said she kept persuading him, but she didn't know what he was on. She said it was like Darian wanted to kill someone he doesn't know from Adam and Eve. Detective John asked Adali's if she has shot a gun in the last 8 hours. She said she shot her friend's gun earlier in the day. Detective John said she shot Darian Kirkland because she was trying to protect her boyfriend. She said she didn't because she doesn't have a gun. Detective John said they know Darian Kirkland was acting stupid. Adali's interjected and said he was. Detective John said people have complicated the whole thing by taking a gun from that room. Adali said whoever took the gun might be the one who did it. Detective John said they are running out of people that could have done it, and that was why she was there. She said she didn't shoot anyone. She said she couldn't have shot a gun. Detective John interjected and said she told them not long ago that she shot a gun that night. He told her that no one is going home until he finds that gun because someone is not telling him the truth. Adali said she told him the truth and that is what she knows. Detective John asked Adolis if she has a vehicle that is out there. She said she did. He asked her what type of vehicle. She said it is a red Mazda Tribute. Detective John asked her if she has an issue with them searching the car. Adolis hesitated. She didn't talk. Detective John said if she has moved the gun, she should tell him because he doesn't care. She said she didn't move any gun. Detective John asked her if there was a gun in her car. She said there is no gun in her car. She said she didn't take any gun. It was the dude that was there that took the gun. She said she saw him picking it off his chest. Detective John asked her who is the dude she was referring to. She said she doesn't know his name. Adolis claimed that the 911 caller's boyfriend was there and that he took Darian Kirkland's gun after the shooting. Detective John said, so the dude just came into her apartment, picked the gun off the dead guy, and walked out. Adolis said he was there the whole night. She said there were 2 guns in that house. She said he took both of them. Detective John asked her whether both of them were in the bedroom. Adolis said they were. Detective John asked her why she didn't say that long ago. She said it was because they were all questioning her as if she is a suspect. Detective John said there is a dead guy, therefore everybody is a suspect. He told her that he has a feeling that she is still holding back. He presented a warrant to her and asked her to append her signature to it. He told her that the warrant gives them the power to search her car back at the complex. She signed the warrant, and Detective John made his way out of the interrogation room. When he joined his team members, a detective said something going wrong there. He said they were lying for a reason because if the guy is robbing and shooting him up, then she has no reason to lie. While Detective Max Ryden headed back to the apartment complex to search Adolis' car, Detective Brown and Detective White headed out to speak to Isaiah, the surviving victim. A half hour later, Detective Brown said he just talked to Isaiah. Isaiah said Mr. Kirkland pulled out the gun and had serious intent of firing the gun. Isaiah said he was in the closet when he heard about 4 to 5 shots. He got hit once in the arm and grazed a shoulder. He said after that, the shooting stopped. He said he believed that it was the opportunity he needed to run out the door. He said when he did, the guy was on the ground there in the bedroom. He said he never had a gun, and he never fought with the guy over the gun. While they were driving back to homicide, Detective Max Ryden called Detective Brown on the phone. He told that he searched the Mazda Tribute thoroughly, but he found nothing on it. He said while he was searching, a woman at the complex approached him. He said the woman told him that the guy has the gun is there in the complex. The woman said after the shooting, she spoke to the boyfriend of the 911 caller, the man who allegedly took the guns. The woman said the guy has been walking around the complex apartment telling everybody that he has the guns, and he was present when the incident happened. He also said Adolis and the guy that was missing called the dead guy to go and rob the guy that is in the hospital. He said that according to the woman, Darian Kirkland, Adolis, the 911 caller, and her boyfriend were all in the plan to rob Adolis' boyfriend Isaiah. She said the dead guy got a gun and came back. They didn't realize that he was going to have a gun during the robbery. It went bad because the dead guy was on PCP and he had a gun. So then, Adolis shot him. Detective Max Ryden told Detective John that it sounded like Adolis wanted her boyfriend to get robbed, but she had to stop him because she didn't know Darian was going to bring a gun to the robbery. He said the plan was to rob her boyfriend, and it went bad. Adolis had to step in because she thought he was going to kill her boyfriend. He said the boy is telling people out there that Adolis shot first before Darian shot. He said it was 100% what Crime Detective Kyle said. He said all his shots were when he was on the ground. He said the woman told him that the guy that has the gun lives out there, but she doesn't know his exact apartment. Detective John asked Detective Ryden whether the woman gave him the guy's name. Ryden said she didn't. Detective Ryden said she told him that she can give him his Facebook name. He said she is on Facebook at the moment, therefore, he is waiting for her to give him the name. After Detective Brown got the information from Detective Ryden, he said he will interview the suspects again. He said he will interview the 911 caller first. When Detective Brown was going to the 911 caller's interrogation room, Adolis called him. She said she wants to talk. When he entered the room, he told Adolis that they have talked to some other people, and there is a bunch of stuff that they know since the last time they talked to her. He said she should just tell the truth. Detective Brown asked Adolis that what the part about the robbery is. She said that part. They had all off that skidded out without her. Detective Brown asked her that who are they. She immediately changed her story and gave detectives the name of the man that took the guns and now claimed that he, Darian, and Adolis planned to rob Isaiah. Detective Brown asked her if the guy was her friend or boyfriend. She said he is not her boyfriend. She said he is just a friend. While she was being interrogated, Detective Ryden forwarded the photo of the man who allegedly took the guns. Detective Brown showed her the picture Ryden sent to him, and she identified him as the man who took the guns. She said they were sneaking when they were doing all of that. She said she wasn't stupid because she knows her. She knows Darian Kirkland, and she knows that they are all thieves. Detective Brown asked her if that was the reason the guy came over. She said that was her intention. She said everybody she met, she knows Adolis and her intended to rob Isaiah, but she guessed he didn't have anything for her to show for her to rob. She said he left with Darian and he was like he was going to get a pack of bars or a pack of sizzles. She said when Darian and her friend realized that Isaiah didn't have anything to steal, they tried to sell drugs to him. She said that was when she walked outside, and they told her that they were about to tax Isaiah. Detective Brown asked her what she meant by taxing him. She said it means they were trying to overprice him and then keep the money. She said that was when she came in and told Adolis that they are out trying to rob her boyfriend. She said that was when Adolis called Isaiah and told him to come inside. She said Darian came in juiced and he came into her house talking about how she was about to rob him. She said he was putting his gun in both Adolis and Isaiah's faces. She said that was in her bedroom. She said they were all trying to push Darian Kirkland back. She said it took the combination of all of them to push Darian through the hallway that was outside her room. She said she didn't know how he got through all of them and ran into the room. She said when he entered the room, he slammed the door. She said that was when she and Adolis ran back there. Detective Brown asked her if she knew where Adolis got the gun from. She said she thinks Adolis got the gun from her friend, the same man who allegedly took the guns from the scene. Detective Brown asked Adolis that did she have any involvement in setting the incident up. She said she had no involvement. Detective Brown Adolis that it's hard for him to believe that she was the one person out of the whole group that didn't know that something was going to happen. Adolis swore by God that she didn't know. Detective Brown said if that was the case, why didn't she tell them the truth from the beginning? She said it was because she didn't want Adolis to get into trouble. They left the 911 caller and went to where Adolis was being held. When they entered, Detective Brown said he heard that she was willing to talk to them. She replied in the affirmative. She said she wants to tell them the truth because she feels she won't be in trouble. She said the truth is that she had to do what she did. Detective Brown said they should get to where she did what she had to do. He said, "What is she talking about?" He said she has to tell them the story. She said the story is that Darian came into the house with a gun. She said he came in and he told Isaiah to give him all her stuff, and then Isaiah was like he has nothing to give him. He said he got up in Isaiah's face. She said she thought he was going to shoot him, so she moved his hand, and she was like he was not going to shoot him unless he shoot her too. She said Isaiah ran out of the room, and Darian ran after him. Detective Brown said where Isaiah and Darian were in the bedroom. She said they were. She said she started telling Darian why he was acting like that and what he was on. She said she told him to think about his son. She said he got upset with her and started threatening her for bringing up his son. She said he cocked the gun back and was saying he was going to shoot her. She said he put the gun upon her head and it scared her a lot. She said she was trying to get into the door and the dude she was with had a gun too. She said the dude gave her the gun. Adalis said the 911 caller's friend her his gun and helped her push the door open. She said at that moment, you could tell that Darian was about to shoot. She said immediately he shot. She closed her eyes. She said she saw him pull the trigger, and she shot too. Detective Brown said Darian has a bullet hole in the middle of his back. She said she doesn't understand it. She said she doesn't know where he got shot at because she was scared. Detective Brown said he wants to be sure that they didn't have some pre-planting of the whole situation. He said they heard that there was a plan to rob Isaiah. Adalis said there was, but she didn't know about that. Detective Brown said they didn't hear that part. He said they heard that she was aware of it. She said she wasn't because she likes Isaiah. She said she has been crying because she cannot go and see him. Detective Brown asked Adalis whether she has an issue with them looking at her phone. She said what they meant. Detective Brown said, by looking at her phone, they can say with 100% surety that there's nothing in her phone that says anything about robbing Isaiah today. He said it is to her benefit. Adalis said they can do it. Adalis later revoked her consent for her phone to be checked. It means Detective Brown will need a search warrant for her phone. When detectives left the room, Adalis began to punch the glasses in the interrogation room. She broke 2 of the glasses before Detective Brown was able to detect that there was a problem in the room. Detectives quickly rushed down to the room and handcuffed Adalis. They told her that Ems was on their way to check her hand. Adalis refused Ems treatment. Detective White said their next step is to get a warrant for Adalis' phone to look for the evidence that she or anybody else was part of the robbery plot and see if they can find the gentleman that allegedly took the guns from the apartment to get his side of the story and see what he can add to the story they have. After searching for 3 months without a lead on the man who allegedly took the guns, detectives finally catch a break. The man who allegedly took the guns from the scene of Darian Kirkland's murder was charged with unrelated homicide. Detective White said she lawyered up, so the unfortunate part was that they never got the chance to ask him about the missing guns from Darian Kirkland's murder. He said those guns are still out there. He said they obtained a search warrant for Adalis' phone. He said they got inside her phone and looked. She said that she doesn't have guns, touch guns, or know a thing about guns, or want to mess with them. He said they got a picture in her phone that says otherwise. Detective White that he will have to explain herself in court and tell them when those pictures were taken and how she doesn't play with guns anymore. Detective White said there was no other evidence to prove that anybody else was a participant in the robbery. He said currently, Adalis Nears is the only one being charged with the felony murder of Darian Kirkland. Adalis Nears pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter and was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. The guns were never recovered.